Hi, and welcome to Hypothetically Intentional, where we ask the question, what if we set intentions with everything we do? I'm your host, Michelle Albers, and today I have special guest Laurie Smith. Welcome, Laurie.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
I'm excited to have you here, and I'm excited for what I'm guessing is going to be a lovely conversation and perhaps a deep dive into something that seems like a really simple word or concept, but I have a feeling we're going to go deeper. So, on that note, I'm curious if you would be willing and able to set an intention for us for this podcast.
Oh, I would love to. Well, of course, since everything I do is about flow, I would love for it to flow. And I find with flow, it often takes us into places and directions that we don't often expect. So another intention is just to be open to the sparks and where flow takes us.
That's amazing. I love it, which leads me to my very first question, which is just say more about flow. Like, how do you define it? Because I know how I define it. And I'm just curious, like, because you wrote a whole book about flow, yes?
Yes, the flow habit,
I
which
love it.
just came out. Yeah, and it came out. It's very much rooted in my own experiences with flow, as well as I did a deep dive into the science behind flow and have done a lot of research and interviewed a lot of people about their experiences with flow. How I define flow, I start with the flow state, which is that experience we get when we're so locked into doing something that we're so absorbed that the rest of the world falls away. And often we lose track of time, or we lose a sense of self-consciousness, or sort of, our surroundings get blurry and we're really fully present with an activity, with whatever we're doing. And what's really beautiful, I believe, is that when we look to that experience, it has all of the makings of what it feels like to be in flow in our lives. So no, we might not always be in a constant flow state, but also our lives can feel like we flow, and conversations can feel like they flow. And sometimes we're in the flow state, and sometimes we're coming in and out of little mini flow states during that. But I think it's a great aspiration for life to see how we can participate and be open and allow experiences like that to happen as much as possible.
That's amazing. And so do you have like I have a couple ways I'm going to go with this in just like how I'm perceiving it. Do you have like a method or a system to make that easier? Is that what the book is about?
Yeah, so
Okay.
very much the book is about two things. One, flow is innate. And so as human beings, we're all encoded to get into flow. So whether this is the first time listeners are hearing the word flow and the flow state and being introduced to the idea or not, we've all experienced moments of flow throughout our whole lives. And I often say when we make conscious what we're already doing unconsciously, that's when we have the power to change our lives. So often just becoming aware or hearing conversations like this or having, talking about flow makes us tune into those moments when we experience flow. And so what's really beautiful is, because we're all human, we all have this in common. And I have identified that there are 4 simple steps we can follow to have a higher chance of experiencing flow, to answer your question. But also what's super beautiful is that we all each have our own unique formula for accessing flow too. So there's a word I came up with, which is in the book, which is floativate, which
Oh,
is,
cool.
yes, strategies and tools that we use that uniquely work for us to get into flow. And so I wrote the book not only to introduce basically the overall science and some new perspectives and some new findings that I found when I did a deep dive into the research and the interviews, but also as a guide. I really wanted readers to feel like we were in this together. I was holding their hand, like kind of going through the stories and the stories. I wanted them to feel like they're part of a community and, friends with all these other people that are experimenting with flow. And it's absolutely not that I'm up here and they're down, learning about flow, but that we're all in this together. And as they experiment with flow, they're going to uncover things that uniquely work for them. And that's what I've loved about this journey is like everybody I talk to about flow. I learned something new about flow, and I love to hear how people are experimenting with these concepts and bringing them into their own lives. Like I'm constantly learning. I interviewed kids, and I learned the most about flow from children who had never heard the word flow, but they could like tell me what works for them. And so it's really about self-understanding and unpacking for ourselves our own unique formula for flow. So the book's filled with exercises and questions and lots of ideas for ways we can experiment with flow so that we can experience more of it in our lives.
That's so amazing. One of the things I love about this, and I'm thinking about my own journey, and then also like a lot of what feedback I hear from clients. And, I did yoga teacher training. So I think this is where this is coming from, starting from is like, I feel like the way you describe flow is what like the utopia of how people think meditation is supposed to look. But this feels sometimes I think the like end result or attachment to meditation looking some kind of way. I'm passionate about like redescribing meditation because it seems inaccessible. And the way you're describing this feels so open and so engaging, but also so achievable or accessible, I guess is maybe a better way to say it. And so I love that on some level, it feels like an opening of a door to something similar to meditation. And then and because I didn't think I could do meditation for the longest time. And then over time, I just realized, oh, I was just super perfectionisty, defining it in a way that made it unachievable. It wasn't that it wasn't. And then the other side of that is, the Zentangle method. I do the Zentangle method. And that for me, like they say, you get into like a meditative state, but really it is a flow state and your pen is flowing and your life is flowing and the moment is flowing. And so the way you describe that feels so aligned with, I don't know. I just love that it's a new and different way to describe. And I get that it might be a smidgy different, but it's a new and different way to open a door to things that maybe people have kind of poo-pooed or been like, oh no, like resistant to. And so that this is a new and different way to explore and maybe get curious about how might I have a little less grind and a lot more flow in my life, which is super cool.
Yeah, so this is what makes me so passionate about flow. I have been for the last 25 years. I've studied meditation, I've studied Reiki, energy work, all lots of different forms of coaching and healing. And so I'll tell you the story of how this passion developed but first just to finish that thought, why I am so passionate about flow and why for the last 6 years I've thought of nothing and I just want to share this message with as many people as possible is because it is so practical. We don't have to believe anything. We don't have to use any language. We're talking about an innate biological function, just like breathing, just like the blood flowing through our bodies. We as human beings are made to flow.
I have the
You,
goosebumps.
yeah, I mean, we can call that anything we want, and we
Yes.
can access that anything, any way we want. We can access that by counting rosary beads. We can access that by swimming laps. We can access it by writing, by Zentangle. We can access it by yoga. We can access it by laughing and loving a friend. We can access it because we're human beings. It's so practical. So while all of these other tools are so powerful and have changed my life and the lives of other people, they are so exclusive to those who are comfortable with the language in which we speak when we describe and teach them. And all of these other practices, for the most part, are human developed. So when you said, do I have a system? I don't have a system that I invented. The 4 simple steps are ones that are just things that we do automatically, like a physician would describe how the blood flows through the body. He didn't or she didn't invent that, right? It's what we do. So it's like by witnessing, there's a system and we can participate and help our own biological nature by stepping back and witnessing it and being like, oh, that's how it works. Oh, okay, I can support that the way we support our health. And, we each do this our own way based on our own language, our own culture, our own DNA, our own family makeup, our own trauma, our own gifts, our own passions, our own dreams. All of that gets to go into the soup as we work with flow. It's so practical. There's so much out there about how flow helps us perform and achieve more, because that's the world we live in, right? And that is that is definitely a benefit of flow. I call it the three Qs. We can we can produce more quantity of whatever we're doing at a higher quality quicker when we're in flow. It's true. But it's just one of many benefits. And the greatest benefit is that it improves our emotional well-being. And what I love about flow, because this is why I've studied all these other practices and have worked with them in my own life, is it connects us with our own unique spark. So something happens when we work with flow, or like you said, with Zentangle or whatever, where we start to feel like these embers within us, which is who we really are. And whatever words we put around that, we all kind of know that feeling. We're like, I feel more like me. And we start to feel this sense of passion and purpose, and we start to have hope, and we start to feel like we have something to contribute to the world, or a perspective or a light that no one else has. And we want to follow where that leads. And that's when miracles happen. If we're not comfortable with the word miracle, synchronicities or coincidences, or just that sense that we know where we want to go next. And it's an intuitive sense, and it's just it all comes from within. So that's why I'm so passionate about it. I can tell you how I got here and why the 6 years, but basically I'm so glad that and I'm not surprised based on listening to your podcasts and all the episodes that you honed in on that right away. But that is exactly what I love about it, that it's very grounded in real world practicality, flow, and it can feel spiritual, and it can feel amazing, and it can feel peaceful, and all the things. So,
well, and if I just, as we talk about it, even I'm finding myself reflecting. I mean, I'm active listening too. I don't want to make it sound like I'm tuning out. I'm not, but I can't help but get into like almost that energetic state within myself of like what it feels like to lose track of time, what it feels like to be in that place where you're like, oh, I had no idea X, Y, or Z was happening outside of this room or this space or my internal landscape. And so if I just think about like the moments in my life recently where I've lost track of time, where I've literally been in a flow state, it's refreshing. It takes a weight off. It feels, I don't even know that I have actual words to truly describe it. I mean, you do a great job of that, but like for me, I'm just like, there's something about it it is calm, it is peace, and it is capital M me. And when I get to that place where I like get to just be with myself, and for me, it's and not hate on it, right? Because I used to hate on it. I used to hate on me all the time. I was not comfortable with me or how I showed up in the world, or if I should show up in the world a certain kind of way. It was challenging. And so when I think about, as you're talking about it, think about getting into that state. Like, I don't know. I'm just like, I'm sitting here going, listeners, are you reflecting on that space that like, have you ever gotten there? I think you probably have. Most of us like, oh, wow, I don't remember the last 2 minutes or 10 minutes or 2 hours. But I think everyone's had a pocket of time, and maybe that's not true, but I think everyone's had a pocket of time where they just go, oh, wow, that went faster than I would have anticipated. Or, oh, I really feel relaxed right now. That one thing or one connection or one moment where you just felt really at peace. Like that's what you're describing. And I just think, gosh, if the world could access that on command, so to speak, which makes it sound so not appealing, but just in a way that was more like a reflex than a challenge, because I think when you first start looking at these concepts, if you've never done it before, no matter what word you use, there's a piece of us, I think, that goes, can I really do that? Like we question it,
Yeah. So my favorite thing about flow, and having done all this research and interviews, is are those moments when people remember. They
Yeah.
remember their moments because, I've been doing these 28-day flow challenges where we challenge ourselves to do something 5 to 10 minutes a day that we absolutely love to do that has a high chance of getting us into flow. We may or may not get into flow, but we're experimenting with it. And I mentioned 6 years ago, and how I started this was at the start of the pandemic. I was in a very stuck place and I was feeling very anxious. And I had learned about flow long ago when I read Mihai Csikszentmihalyi's book, Flow, with that title. He's a Hungarian American psychologist that discovered flow. It was the first one to discover flow. So I knew the general concept of flow, and I felt like it had been a long time since I had felt that. And what got me into flow was writing,
Mm.
because I've always loved to write. And so I challenged myself to just write for 5 to 10 minutes a day with the goal of getting into flow, not writing anything specific. So it could have been anything. And I instantly started to feel better and started feeling more like myself and connected to myself. And so I told friends, and friends told friends, and this spread, and hundreds of people around the world were participating in my 28-day flow challenges, which I called them. Um, and what I love was that people showed up. I did Zoom calls and sent out daily emails, and people showed up on these Zoom calls from all around the world, from India, from Uganda, from places that where our cultures couldn't be more different. And yet, just like you're saying, when you describe the feeling and you start to connect with the activities that help you feel flow, it was as if we had it was like, we're soul sisters, we have so much in common. We know each other. And that's what I love about this, because we live at a time where there's so much division, and we're focusing on what makes us different, and we're looking on the exterior. And even the way flow has been communicated about is so focused on the exterior, like exterior gain. But really, flow, what ignites flow, and what Mihai Csikszentmihalyi found, was it's all about what makes life enjoyable to us. It's all about intrinsic motivation. And so we have to bring it back to our inner spark, which is why I talk about doing something that we love to do. And there are people that say, I've never experienced this. I'm too distracted, or, I have this certain reason, or my brain works a certain way. And yet when I talk to them and I interview them and I talk about how we can get into flow doing anything that stretches us a little bit, even if we're having a conversation with someone we love and we're locked in and we're kind of so into it that we're almost upping the game as far as how present we are with that person. We're not thinking that in the moment because we're just present, but we are stretching ourselves unconsciously. We get into flow. One of the interviews in the book, the flow habit. I have a friend who, he is such an athlete, and he coaches soccer, and I've known him for decades, and he's always involved in sports. So I just assumed he had experienced flow in athletics. And he was like, no, he's like, I'm always aware of like what the other players are doing. And I've never, in his memory, remember experienced that where it's just him and the ball. But then the more we talked, and I started saying, the old way that people talk about flow is very limiting, because we think of it in these achievement, exterior gain ways. But if you start to come back to how does it feel, those moments when the volume of feeling self-conscious is way down, and that's why sometimes we don't remember, because we're so present that we have no sense of self in the moment of flow. And so it's easy to forget those moments, right? But we started talking, and he was like, Laurie, when I experience flow, when I go on a long run, and then after the run, I'm sitting on the beach, I put my headphones in, I'm looking at the ocean, and I'm listening to music. And he is also an incredible music lover. Like, that's another thing that I've always known and loved about him. And he's like, and I'm totally listening to the music. I'm totally present with the music. And he's like, that's when for hours, I just go into a different place, and I'm fully present, fully locked in. His mind's not wandering. He's locked into every note and listening. And so I think it's just so important to expand our definition of flow and our version of flow. And also, you mentioned perfectionism. I call myself a recovering perfectionist.
Me
And
too. I call
yeah.
that too.
And so this way of playing with flow and saying we don't have to get into flow. We can just do it for a couple minutes. Do something you love. There's no right or wrong way to access flow. It's so freeing. And that I think that the interesting thing about the science and how flow affects our brain is that the parts of our brain that rule the inner critic go offline during flow. So the more we can lighten up in the beginning and as we floativate and play and do it in our own way, in our own terms, and make it safe for us to access flow, the more we're actually floativating and prepping the brain to so that we're available to experience a flow state. So anyway.
I'm a big believer in creativity and curiosity and playfulness being an access point to a lot of really great things. One
Yeah.
thing I noticed when you were talking about the writing, which I thought was just a really cool distinction, is like you talked about writing just for the sake of writing. There was no productivity involved or no outcome that had to be. It was more about, well, much like the Zentangle method describes, and I'm not trying to hang on that, but like it's about the process, not the outcome. Like we don't necessarily care what comes down on the page. We're just about like what we're doing in this moment. The other thing that I'm loving about this word, I love this, and this is such a weird thing to notice. I don't know how you're going to feel about this. I love that the word flow, like when we talk about it, we talk about stillness on some sort, right? But the word flow implies motion and movement and like, well, motion. It implies action or something going somewhere. And yet when we talk about being in the present moment, I feel like, and maybe this is just my brain connecting sort of like my yoga teacher training and my other trainings that speak of meditation and stillness. It's like to still the mind, to quiet the mind, all those things. A lot of what you're talking about, like I said, and I'm not poo-pooing like what I learned in those ways. I'm not. But the way you're describing it feels like it's another door opening or another invitation for exploration and curiosity without, it's almost like you're not predefining it, but we need our words to define it so we understand what's actually happening. So that's like language can get tricky for me when we talk about these sort of concepts. But I super love that flow so screams motion. And yet what we're really describing is it's almost like a pause in time where you get to sort of freeze in the moment of taking time with yourself, which feels different than like time in the external world. I don't know if I'm describing that correctly or in a way that I really truly mean it, but I'm finding that fascinating and I love that flow implies action and movement. And yet what we're describing is this pause with self that is easy and calm perhaps, and I don't know. It does spark something. Like when I think about it and talk about it and feel about it, I get like joyful. There's a joy that comes into my energy that feels like, oh yeah, I really would love to, treat myself and nurture myself with more of that. And perhaps lately that's been harder to find. So I get to invite myself to really be mindful about it and put it into practice, which also, like some of the words we use to describe this stuff sound bleh, you know? But what they really are is exploration and curiosity and playfulness and connection. But it might be connection with you. It might be connection with another human. It might be connection with a piece of music. It might be connection with water, beach, the nature, right? It's like it can come in so many different forms. And I think sometimes we forget that it can come in many different forms. And it sounds like your book has all that there accessible for us to look into. And I'm curious more about the research, and I don't know, that's a big question, but can you just go a little bit more into that?
Yeah, first, I do want to just speak to this stillness because it's so beautiful. And I just love how you're honing into these things that I'm so passionate about. If when we connect with the present moment, right? Then there's another present moment. Then
Yeah.
there's another present moment. So there is movement. So I feel like we don't want to stop,
Right.
right? Our purpose is to constantly be growing and stretching and evolving and seeing where that soft, still voice is calling us to go. It's all movement, but it's almost like we drop into this slow, beautiful, peaceful river, or, whatever visualization means for each of us. But so it's quiet. It is still much more still than the outer. And yet there is this movement where we never really want to be stopped or still. And in the book, I've always talked a lot about the true self in my work. But in the book, I was like, I think it's the flow self, but I don't think it's a noun. I think it's a verb, the flowing self. It's like there's this part of us that is always this quiet, slow movement. So anyway, so thank you for speaking that and putting that into words, because I think that's just a really beautiful insight.
Oh, and
And
I
I,
think there's grace in what you just said, because it's like, yes, when we're in a moment, there's the next moment and the next moment after that. And maybe that implies there's some sort of requirement for action, but sometimes the next moment isn't much different than the one before it, and that's not a bad thing.
Mhm,
I think we put
mhm.
so much pressure on ourselves to expand rapidly and to take these big,
Yes,
huge leaps. And what I just heard in what you were saying is it can be the tiniest step. It can be from one
tiny
breath to the
step.
next. And it doesn't like that is a shift. That is a flow. There is something there for you. And it doesn't have to be this grandiose, huge, exponential thing or
Yes,
doing. Yeah, I love
yes.
that. And the flowing state, the flowing self. That's amazing.
Yeah, so you asked about the science. I had so much fun. So I used to work in the pharmaceutical industry in the communication field and represent researchers in all different areas. And so I get into flow reading peer-reviewed research. So I did such a deep dive into peer-reviewed studies, not just in psychology, but also in sociology and also in medicine. And I had so education and all leadership, all these pulling all this research together and drawing new conclusions. And a couple things, we don't have time to cover it all, of course, but like
Fair, yeah.
the lower it, our cortisol is lowered when we experience flow. So there is really this calming. Also, I mentioned that the parts of our brain that look at us as separate from other people, or are focused on our self-conscious, how we're perceived by others, those go offline. I came up with this feel positive flow framework, and basically, I researchers over the years and all the research have said that there's conditions, all these conditions to getting into a flow state, rather than necessarily benefits, although some of the research showed benefits, but also so when you search out there about how to get into a flow state, there's so many different ideas. There's 9 steps, there's 4 steps, there's 2 steps. But I got all of those scraps of paper of like the conditions and the benefits of flow. And I was like, I want to come up with an acronym that's easy for us all to understand, and I was playing with them, and I had this eureka moment when they were on my kitchen counter one day where I was like, oh my gosh, it spells feel positive. And the word positive, which is like the number one benefits of flow, and the word positive, that acronym, it represents the research, the science-backed benefits of flow, the top ones. And the word feel represents the 4 simple steps to getting into flow. So when you mentioned the science behind it, I'm just going to like share a couple from the word positive.
Perfect. Yeah.
But the P is positive, or positive emotion. So that can mean anything from peace or positivity, and we get a dopamine hit when we experience flow. So it's really backed by science and what's happening in our body. Another one of the words I love is oneness, which is the O, and that can mean merging with our activities. So like where it feels like with Zentangle, like your pen just knows where to go, or you become one with the ocean when you're swimming, or you feel like you're almost merging with a friend when you're talking about something. So it can be a spiritual oneness with a greater flow all around us, or it can just be very practical, like in knowing what to do next. My favorite is the E at the end of the word positive, which is egolessness, which really means it sounds like a very spiritual word, but what it means is we're not self-conscious. We're not thinking about, oh, well, how's my hair look? How's my, is my makeup okay? What are they thinking of me as I'm saying this? No, we're just like locked into letting, words flow or our truth flow or our experience flow out of us. So anyway, there is a lot of science behind the benefits that we experience. And I had a lot of fun uncovering some new findings, especially in the sense of balance. So the feel, 4 simple steps are: the first is focus, which we hear a lot about focus, but I put questions to the 4 simple steps. So for me, that just means, what is my top priority in this moment? So like you said about the present moment. And this is why I think flow can be a way of life as well. So if we just, like you said, with your intention, setting an intention for this episode, if we just develop a practice of asking ourselves that question constantly: what is my top priority in this moment? My top priority is being with you, right? Right here, right now, in this podcast interview, this moment. It's not about the groceries I'm going to get at the store the next moment. And just, getting into the practice of focusing in the here and now increases our ability to enter flow. The E, this is the one that gets missed. It's engage. And this is what we talked about doing it in your own terms, in your own way. And the question is, how can I make this more fun or meaningful for me? Bringing it back to our own inner spark. Because we can experience flow. There's doing things that are horrific and chores that are awful that we hate. But we only do if we figure out a way to do it in our own terms and make it fun for us or meaningful, or, so it's that inner process. And then the other E is equalize. And I came up with this word from my experience scuba diving, where we need to equalize the pressure of our inner airways with the outer pressure. So this equalize has a lot to do with the stretching that I've been talking about. Like, we need to stretch out of our comfort zone, but not so much that we're having a panic attack or an anxiety attack, but we do need to stretch ourselves and keep that movement that we're talking about just enough so that we're not feeling stuck, like that stuck feeling I described I felt at the start of the pandemic before I started stretching myself to just do 5 to 10 minutes a day and stretching a little bit, as you said, just a little bit out of my comfort zone. And then the last L, or the last letter L, is listen and let go. And that's very much what we're talking about when we're talking about overcoming our perfectionism. Like, just being able to let go of not being in control of the moment, not knowing where our flow is going to take us, showing up, even if we have a goal for the writing session or whatever, being willing to be surprised. And we're only willing to be surprised if we're listening, if we're also listening to this greater flow of where we're being called, where our pen is meant to move, where the conversation's going to go. We're not so rigid, which is the opposite of flow, that we, aren't willing to let go. And that's where the everyday miracles happen, right? It's like this or something better. Well, if we really let go and lean into flow, that's when our lives start to flow in amazing directions. So those are the 4 simple steps. There's a lot more in there, and I have a lot more questions for each step. But, it's just fun to think about, even if we don't get into a flow state, holding the space for those 4 things as we move through our lives creates these openings where we can experience more of the flow state. And we can ask those questions before we do an activity, but also more flow in our lives overall as well.
It sounds like the book is really interactive. Like, it invites the reader to play along, so to speak, right?
Yes.
To really dive in and do their own thing while they read and learn about it. That's really cool. I love that. I'm wondering if we can circle back to, well, I'm wondering if you'd be willing to share personal, because you talked about feeling really stuck at the beginning of the pandemic. And then I think you mentioned the word anxiety as well. And so I'm just curious, because I feel like to be in a place described as stuck and filled with anxiety, I'm curious, how did you take that step to dive into the research and do this? Is it just something that you knew? I'm basically, the question is how did you help yourself through that anxiety and stuckness? Because I feel like the book is the result of that, But like, how did you get stuck? Because sometimes when we're stuck in anxiety, besides to take that first step or to figure out that first action to help us move out of that is really challenging. A, is that in the book, I guess? Because if that's the case, just go get the book. But also, like, would you share a snippet of that here on the podcast? Because I feel like it's such an
Yeah.
important thing to support people.
Absolutely. I mean, that is how the 5 to 10 minutes came up. And that's where when I challenged myself to write 5 to 10 minutes a day, that's where the baby steps are so important, right? When we're in a state of either panic, like, in those early days of the lockdown when we didn't know what was going on. And I have kids and they were coming to me with questions and we were so scared and unsure. And they were asking me questions I didn't have the answers for. And I was like, I'm feeling scattered and I am not my best self. Like I'm not able in this moment to show up for my kids the way I want to be. And I was also coming off of a time in my life where I was feeling really, really stuck. I had been doing coaching and teaching, but I realized like I hadn't felt that joy that I felt writing. And so it really started very much as like a desperate act of saying, I've got to do something. What can I do? And I didn't tell my kids and I didn't tell my parent, I didn't tell my husband and I didn't tell my friends and I didn't tell my parents either, that I was doing this. And sometimes it's like, it can be such a radical act to do something so small, but we have to remember that that is, those baby steps really are how we slowly start to get out of, we often feel like we have to do something gigantic. Like even sometimes people, when we're in that stuck place, even just finding a therapist. I know I've gone through this with friends where it's like, it's too big. It's too hard to even figure out which therapist or my insurance or whatever. But it's helpful to remember that we start with really small baby steps and we don't have to do it perfectly. And we just show up. And what happened for me is gradually what I started to do was even during one of these 28-day flow challenges, I started to write poetry and I had never had a desire to write poetry. I never wanted to be a poet. And it was almost like I started to hear lines of poetry even when I was in the shower or I was going through my life. And having that happen beneath the surface, even if it wasn't aligned with the big picture view of how I wanted to see myself, what I wanted to do in the world, is so comforting to know that there's something happening. There's this movement happening within me where I'm not stuck anymore. There's something creative flowing through me. I'm excited to show up on the paper and see what's going to come. That suddenly starts to feel really positive, right? Like really promising. And I was so excited by it that's when I started to tell friends, and only friends that I knew would understand, only friends that I knew also had a creative side to them. And they started choosing, like watercolor paintings and sketching and getting back to those creative hobbies they loved when they were a kid. So it was really delicate and really small and really fragile and vulnerable. And it seems silly, but sometimes the things that, seem silly have the greatest power, right? It's like just doing, and I often say to my clients, it's like always have a backup plan so that you can always feel like you're succeeding, like even a 1 minute thing that you're going to do before you go to bed that feels like flow to you, that you're accountable, because there is that confidence. When we talk about anxiety and stuckness, we're feeling out of control, right? We don't feel in control. So even though flow is letting go, but by doing that, we're taking control of our own lives, right? By deciding to show up just for a minute, suddenly we're owning it, right? We're owning the experience. So really, one of the benefits that flow challenge gave me was I felt like in this world where we had no idea what was going to happen next, where I had no control over what was right and wrong and the rules that I had to tell my kids. They weren't our rules as parents anymore. They were these outer rules, right? And when I felt out of control and like stuck in my own life, I was able to take my power back just by saying, I'm just going to do something 30 seconds, 1 minute. I'm going to keep that momentum going slowly, and connecting with other people is really important too. But I find when we do this and when we're open and when we're willing to be a little bit vulnerable and share with even one other person what we're experiencing, it starts to take over and we start to have this energy about us that's not stuck anymore, right? We show up in the world a little excited, a little positive, a little bit more confident. And there is a lot of science behind flow and confidence, connecting the two. And so then that starts to kick off synchronicities and people come into our lives, and that's how the magic happens. But it starts with just that little spark, just those few seconds a day.
Well, and I love that you noticed you were missing joy. And then you asked yourself what brought you joy. And then you chose to do it consistently. Like that's such a beautiful way to show up for ourselves. And I think sometimes we forget to even consider what we might enjoy or like, or what might like inspire the spark. So and then I also love what you said. This is something that I think about for my own practice, and I speak about every now and again, or often. My students might say often, is you kept it sacred first. It was your own sacred practice. And I don't know, sometimes I feel like that energy, it's almost like when it is sacred to you and only you for at least a little while, there's something about that it makes it easier to keep the layers away. Like it makes it easier not to worry about what other people are thinking about it because nobody knows about it. And so
Yes.
it almost like it is a way of giving yourself grace. Like there's a layer to that maybe I haven't even necessarily connected in that way, but there's like this beautiful, you just described a beautiful like landscape of I feel stuck and anxious and what might I need? Like I'm missing joy. Like you answered your own question and then you solved the problem with exploration, not an expectation. That's the other thing I love about everything you just said. And I'm sure all of this is in the book of like that story and how it worked for you and how it might work for other people. The other thing I'm loving about how you're speaking about it is you're telling your story very like specific to what you did, but also really keeping the landscape and the door wide open of like, it doesn't have to be writing for you. It can be whatever sparks joy in you. Like one person did watercolor and another person, and on some level, I feel like those kind of choices are all creative because you have to kind of start from nothing and create whatever it is that might spark joy in you. But I don't know. I just really love the openness of how you speak about it and how you flow about it and all of that. So I really am appreciating you sharing all of this. And yeah, is there something else specific to the book? I want to make sure people know how to find you. So I'm kind of circling into that place because I don't want to forget. Like, A, how do people find you? But also, is there something else about the book that you feel like is a really key point that might inspire someone to pick it up or that is really important to know? I feel like we've talked a lot about different aspects of it, but I also feel like there might be something that is just sort of left unsaid that you might want to get out there.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of every chapter of the book, I have a section that you're already a flow expert. And so the book is very much designed, as you said, to be, we're in this together, very interactive, and designed to help you, the reader, uncover their own unique formula for flow through experimentation, but also through questions and some very specific guidance. And so that's what makes me so passionate. I put so much energy into how the book is designed. So it's very visual, lots of breakout boxes. There's flow tips, there's flow facts, there's flow breaks where it's like, okay, let's just take a deep breath. That was a big one, that was a big concept. And here's what we're going to do next. And so it's very, very interactive, like we're two friends going on this journey together. And so I definitely wrote it that way because I believe in this so much and I wanted it to be as accessible as possible and open the door for people to uncover their own expertise, their own spark within. The other thing also I want to share is that I'm still doing these free 28-day flow challenges. When I started them at the start of the pandemic, they were helping so many people and I was getting so much positive feedback. And I knew that there was this power of community. And so I swore then, I'm like, I will always offer these for free. So right now, people can go to my website and sign up for the self-guided emails where they get one a day and go through it. I'm always doing these in my own life. And so, I'm on social media and in different places sharing my own journey in different ways. But they can go to my website, Laurie Smith, LaurieSmith.com, or theflowhabit.com will also take you there. The book is called The Flow Habit. It's available wherever books are sold. I have my own podcast, which is The Flow Habit. So it's
Nice.
easy to remember. Yeah. And mostly, just to speak to this whole idea, where we were about feeling stuck, there's something in here called the flow cycle, which I've has an extra step than what you might have heard about before. And I call it the safer flow cycle. But it's important to remember that we're not always going to be in flow, and that part of life is that we're always going to have these moments. They're very human. They're very real. But I think whenever I get into those moments now, I like to think that this just means that a creative breakthrough is on its way, because that's how the flow cycle works. That's how life works. That's how the seasons work. That's how, so it's almost like we can think of it as, you said it's sacred. And I really do think it is. We can think of it as like being in a chrysalis. And instead of looking at that as gloom and doom, we can be like, oh, asking ourselves, like, I wonder what's about to flow. I wonder what's behind this anxiety or this stuck feeling. Maybe it's, that something's ready. Something's starting to get ready to emerge from that chrysalis within me. And this isn't an ending at all, but I don't know. There's no way I can know what's in that chrysalis. I can't see past, no matter how wise and smart we are and how much we use our thinking mind, we can't see what's inside. We just have to show up and, like you said, create a safe space, make it really safe for that spark that wants to come out of us. And, that unique essence, that unique talent that we each have, that the world really, really needs. We have to show up and create a safe space for that to come out into the world. And sometimes that's just showing up, a few seconds a day and remembering and trusting that that's trying to come. So let me just show up for myself and experiment and play with flow, whether I experience it or not, and trusting. Because, I really believe that everybody has a unique gift, and the world really is going through a hard time right now and needs all of us to show up in whatever way we can, but that's going to be different for each of us. And I really believe that flow has a lot to do with what's going to make it happen.
That's amazing. I love the choice in that. It's like an invitation to make a choice, and it's just that. It's just an invitation to make a choice. There's no demands, there's no, musts. There's just what if. There's a lot of just what if you explore, what if you get curious, what if you see? What if you take a chance to see if you can see in a new and different way? It's so amazing. Okay, so you gave us your website. The challenge is still going. I love that. So the way you described it, I get the impression it's almost like it's just evergreen. It's an email process. Do you ever still do the live Zoom stuff too, or is that like on pause?
Yeah, well, so I offer a flow circle, what I call flow circle, which is a paid process that people can sign up for, that are for people that really want to take their journey with flow deeper. I lead intuitive guided meditation, so I get into flow, kind of showing up, seeing what people are showing up, what's on their hearts and minds. And then I lead a guided meditation in those flow circles, as well as provide support so that people can support each other in making flow a habit. So I do those every single month, but I do periodically do free Zoom calls. And we just came out of January where I did on my podcast, I did a meditation every single day, and on my YouTube channel, like a little video every single day. And we all did the flow challenge together. Right now I'm doing another one because February is the full moon was the first of the month. And so now I'm sharing some of my flow writing, which feels very vulnerable, that like raw writing that I do every single day on my new Substack account. So I'm always trying to create ways that our community can connect for free for newcomers, as well as, offering this safe container for people that really, really want to take their journey with flow deeper. But you're absolutely right that I like to say you're never behind, you're always right on time. If you
Yeah.
feel called today and it's the middle of a month and you're listening to this podcast after, January or February and you want to do this, the book is absolutely the best way to start because especially if you want to take your journey really deep and make it a way of life. But if you just want to experiment and see what this is about, you can also sign up for the free 28-day emails, and the first day that you sign up, the next day will be your day one. And then you can just do it yourself and connect with our community in any way that you choose, whether it's, coming on to I like to do at least once a quarter a free Zoom call. And so if people are on my email newsletter, they can find out about that.
That's amazing. What I love, this is such a simple little thing, and I don't know why I'm like even speaking it on the mic, but I noticed it and am called to say it. I love that when people sign up for the 28-day challenge, that they get an email and then there's a pause and then it starts. Like, that's beautiful because nothing feels rushed about that. It's like, oh, hey, I'm going to sign up for this thing and it's going to wait until tomorrow. Like, I get to prepare for somehow, not that they need to prepare, but just, I don't know, there's something. I kind of love it. Like, and you could take that a lot of different ways, right? Like, depending on how you show up in the world, some people are like, oh, good, a pause. I get to just sort of, ponder how I might want to show up based on the information on the sign up. But other people might be like, what do you mean? I'm ready to start right now. And I just love that. Like, we're all going to receive it differently, right? But there's something about like right out of the gate, there's a pause that we get to consider and be curious about it first. That's amazing.
Well, you're going to love this, Michelle, because in that first email, they're invited to set an intention.
Yeah, that's awesome. You're
So
speaking
their
to my heart.
intention for the 28 days to choose an activity, and then they can hit reply and tell me it. And I'll receive it. And, for as long as I can, I like to respond back and be like, yay, go, you got this. And I love to hear and hold space for each person's unique intention for doing it. And
That's
people
so
do it
awesome.
again and again and again, or just once and it, experience whatever they're meant to experience. So.
Well, and I think that so speaks to the fact that people do it over and over again, which doesn't surprise me, but it just speaks to how much community plays a role and how important it is. And I think if it's not presented to us, I think sometimes we forget about it or it gets missed. But I believe there's an innate human craving, need for community. And
Yeah.
so what a beautiful way you're offering that to the world. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the community piece is huge, which is why I included so many flow stories in my book. Even it was really important to me to give them the sense, and I say that right in the beginning of the book. Now that you're reading this book, you are part of the community too. This isn't something that happened. This is something that's ongoing, that's active, because you're absolutely right. There is some greater flow that connects us. I mean, we don't have time now, but I have stories, and there's stories in the book about the absolute miraculous synchronicities and connections that have happened between the people doing this. And even just between people that I have like passing conversations with like this, and they start to think about it, and then they reach out to me and be like, you're never going to believe this happened. And it's just, there is something real. In our community, my flow community, our motto is when we lift each other up, we all rise. And that's very much the attitude of, as I know it is of a lot of healing communities, but the idea that we want to enter into this with that intention of lifting ourselves up and lifting other people up and just, seeing where we're all going to go, but reaching a higher place through the power of flow together. So I'm glad
Yeah.
you
I'm
noticed.
so passionate about community. I think we're not meant to do this alone, but also like we have to do our own work alone. Like nobody gets to take your flow state. Like it's yours and it's sacred
Right.
to you and it's all you. And also to be in your own unique flow in a community is like, yes, this is it. And I don't believe we're supposed to do this alone. I don't believe we're meant to do any of it alone. I also understand like we have to do our own work. Like no one can do it for us. But there's
Mm-hmm.
something beautiful about recognizing that, oh, I can be in my own unique flow state and you can be in your own unique flow. And then we can be in community together and somehow that amplifies all of it for the best and highest good. And that's such a important thing that I think sometimes gets overlooked or defined in a way that makes it scary or I don't know. I just think it's lovely. So I appreciate you sharing time on the mic today and I'm excited about your book. When did it
you.
actually release? You said just this year?
December
The end of
30th
last
of
year.
last year. So yeah, we're only
Wow.
a few weeks in.
Oh,
It's
that's
brand new.
amazing.
It's like birthing a baby. It's very
Yeah.
exciting. And yeah, I've been pouring my heart and soul into it as I've shared. So yeah, super exciting. It's a super exciting
Awesome.
time. Yeah.
This feels like a good place to wrap up. Is there anything else you want to add?
No, no. Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, and if people want to connect again, it's theflowhabit.com or my book is The Flow Habit. And I would love to connect with them through my own podcast as well. So The Flow
Beautiful. I'll be
Habit.
sure to
Yeah,
put all of those links in the show notes so that they
great.
know how to find your book and where to find your podcast and where to get the 28-day challenge and all the things. So
Thank
I'll make sure
you.
I include that in the show notes. So if you're listening and you're curious, it'll be there easy for you. All right. I
Thank
think that's a
you.
wrap. Thank you
Yeah,
so
this
much,
has been
Laurie.
so fun. Thank you for
So
having me.
lovely. Bye.
Bye.